Night descends in velvet shroud. No sound dares to cry out loud, but a pulse beats in the deep. Secrets that the darkness keeps. Oh, the crimson pulse, it starts to race in this haunted, shadowed space. A chilling thrill, a dark delight, lost within the endless night. Through the mist, an eerie gleam. Is this real or just a dream? Unseen hands upon my soul, losing all of my control. Oh, the crimson pulse, it starts to race in this haunted, shadowed space. A chilling thrill, a dark delight, lost within the endless night. This haunting cold, it pulls me in, where shadows dance and fears begin. A primal scream, a silent plea. This twisted thrill sets my spirit free.
The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, now carried a new, nauseating undertone. The cloying, metallic tang of death. James sat hunched on the worn sofa, the old rifle resting across his knees, its cold steel a meager comfort against the gnawing terror in his gut. Caleb, pacing in front of the makeshift barricade at the front door, ran a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture of a man wrestling with a problem he couldn't solve with logic or brute force. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the scarred coffee table between them, the amber liquid glinting mockingly in the lamplight. "We're fucked, James," Caleb said, his voice a low, gravelly curse. He took a long pull from the bottle, the liquid burning a path down his throat. "Fucking goddamned fucked. No signal. No one knows we're here, and there's a goddamn psycho out there who cuts people's throats for sport." James didn't respond. He just stared into the dancing flame of the oil lamp, the image of the dead man in the barn replaying in his mind with nauseating clarity. The vacant eyes, the gaping wound, the dark, viscous pool spreading across the hay. The sheer, senseless violence of it all was what truly chilled him. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a methodical, savage act. A warning. "What if it's a drifter?" James finally ventured, his voice a fragile thread in the heavy silence. "Someone passing through? A hunter?" Caleb let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "A hunter? James, look at that poor fucker. That wasn't a hunting accident. That was an animal act. A fucking monster." He gestured wildly with the bottle. "And that sound we heard last night? That wasn't some wild animal. That was him, fucking enjoying his work." The thought sent a shiver of profound revulsion through James. The scream, raw and anguished, had been the sound of a life ending. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the mental picture, but it was no use. The terror was a living thing, coiling in his stomach. Caleb, seeing his brother's distress, took a cigarette from his pack, a Marlboro Red, and lit it with a practiced flick of his Zippo. The pungent smoke filled the small room, a temporary balm against the rank smell of fear. "Look, man," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "We just need to get through the night. The sun comes up, we can hike out, head to the nearest town." "What chances, James? What fucking chances? We're sitting ducks." Caleb's voice rose, a jagged edge of panic in his tone. He took a long drag from his cigarette, the tip glowing like an angry eye in the gloom. This whole goddamn place is a trap. I told you coming back was a mistake. I told you nothing good ever came out of this shithole. James felt a flash of anger, a surge of adrenaline that temporarily eclipsed his fear. Don't blame me for this. You're the one who agreed to come back. You're the one who thought we could finally put the ghosts of this place to rest. Caleb's face twisted in a sneer. Ghosts? There are no ghosts, James. Just a whole lot of evil. You were the one obsessed with finding out what happened to Mom and Dad. You were the one who thought there was some great mystery here. Well, congratulations. You found your fucking mystery. And it's got a goddamn body count. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the bravado slipping away, revealing the raw fear beneath. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. He took another drag of his cigarette, his hand shaking. I'm just losing my mind. We're in a nightmare. James nodded, the anger dissipating as quickly as it had come. Caleb was right. They were in a nightmare, a real one. He looked at the old rifle in his hands, its weight suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. He had no idea how to use it. He had never even held a gun before tonight. Did you recognize the guy? James asked, his voice low. James held his breath, straining his ears against the sound of his own thundering heart. And then, he heard it too. The faint, almost imperceptible crunch of a boot on gravel, followed by a soft, rhythmic patter. It wasn't an animal. It was a man who was walking around their house. They sat in frozen silence, the only sound the frantic rhythm of their breathing. The footsteps stopped at the front of the house, right outside the barricaded door. There was a long, excruciating moment of silence, and then a slow, dragging sound, as if something heavy was being pulled across the porch. James's grip on the rifle tightened, his knuckles white. He looked at Caleb, and in the dim light, he saw the same dawning horror on his brother's face. Then, a low, guttural growl, followed by a wet, tearing sound, and finally, a heavy thud. The sound was unmistakable. A piece of meat, something heavy and still dripping, had been dropped at their front door. A warning. A sick, cold dread washed over James. He felt the bile rise in his throat. Caleb stood, his face a mask of furious, terrible resolve. He walked to the front door, his hand on the barricade, his eyes blazing. "You son of a bitch!" he screamed, his voice raw with fury. "You goddamned coward! Show yourself, you fucking animal!" There was no answer, only the chilling silence of the woods, and the oppressive knowledge that the predator was still out there, just beyond their sight, and they were its prey. Caleb stared at him, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "James, stop. Stop with the bullshit. There are no fucking others. There are people, and one of them is a killer, a savage." He downed the rest of the whiskey, the bottle hitting the coffee table with a hollow thud. "We need to get some sleep. We have to be alert. Fucking Christ. I'm going to be useless if I pass out." James knew Caleb was right, but the thought of closing his eyes, of surrendering to the darkness, was unbearable. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to writhe and stretch, taking on menacing shapes. He kept his grip on the rifle, his knuckles white. Eventually, exhausted by the day's horrors and the suffocating tension, James drifted into a fitful, shallow sleep. His dreams were a maelstrom of terror. The dead man's contorted face, the guttural scream, the shadowy figure from his drawing, its red eyes glowing with malevolent intent. He awoke with a jolt, his heart hammering against his ribs, a cold sweat beating on his forehead. Caleb was still awake, staring out the window, a lit cigarette, a faint ember in the darkness. He turned, his eyes meeting James's, and James saw it then, the raw, unfiltered fear he had been trying to hide all evening. "Did you hear that?" Caleb whispered, his voice so low James almost didn't hear him. Hear what? Footsteps, Caleb said, a terrible stillness coming over him. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Someone's out there. And they're not checking on us.